this is Mhairi again. Thank you very much for watching last week. It was a nerve-wracking week because it was the first time that I'd ever done anything as a vlog just as Mhairi and not as Tallulah, and I was really nervous that people may be expecting her in her feather boa and may not be happy with me and a bare neck. So thank you for watching, and thank you so much for commenting. Thank you for sending me in your suggestions of what you do to listen to your heart. Even if it is just whispering, you know, Dragonista, that's still making a noise, or you're still listening. So even if it's whispering and not screaming, it's a good thing to be doing. Anyway, so thank you. Please continue to comment, and it's just really interesting to have a conversation. To that end, what I wanted to talk about today is that quote, and I think this is from Winston Churchill, said at one point, "All we have to fear is fear itself," which was actually something that a bit flummoxed me for a while, for a few years. I didn't really understand what that meant until I came face to face with my worst fear. I mean, like, when I say worst fear, I don't mean like my whole worst lifetime fear. Like, obviously there are worse things than this, like, I don't know, you know, an alien invasion or an atomic bomb. That would be bad. I've recently watched a few atomic bomb films and I don't want to be anywhere near that. So this is more like a daily fear, and that is rats. I am totally phobic of rats, and anyone that knows me very well or has ever lived with me will attest to that fact, because I sort of become like that woman that you always saw just the legs of, you know, in Tom and Jerry. I cannot abide them. It is bigger than me, this fear. And so a couple of years ago, I was living in a little guest house in Studio City. So a guest house, for people that are in Europe and might not know this, it is like just a house in the garden, a little self-contained cottage, essentially, in a garden of a house. And I lived in one that had a beautiful garden. It made me feel a little bit like Snow White. You know, it had bamboo around it and gorgeous trees and flowers and whatnot, and it was pretty idyllic. But it was pretty small, so I always kept the door open to sort of give me more of a sense of space. And there was this one morning that I was there with the door open, and I was on the phone to New York, so it was a work phone call, so, you know, had to have a certain tone. And I was wandering around the flat, and I looked out the door just sort of aimlessly, and I saw something underneath one of the bird feeders, this sort of pile of animals grappling around each other. And I kind of just went through a mental checklist of all the things that wasn't. Like, birds, no. Squirrels, no. Rabbits, no. It was as if my brain couldn't really understand what I was looking at. And then I realised I was looking at 7 rats, sort of tumbling over each other in this ratty tail pile, basically. And it was about 2 meters away from me, and there was nothing separating me from the rats because the door was open. So obviously I'm on the phone, so I can't have an emotional reaction. I have to keep it cool. I closed the door. I managed to kind of quite quickly get off the phone, and then I just stood there and stared at the rats, like just took it in. I couldn't take my eyes off it, partly because I didn't want to, in case they suddenly, I don't know, got in even though the door was closed. I felt like I had to stare at it to make sure that I could control it. And then after a few minutes, I realised that I was still standing and I was still breathing, and that, you know, I was actually still thinking thoughts, and I was still cognizant, and I was still alive. And then I realised that I had actually always thought if I came in touch with rats that close, that I probably wouldn't survive that I would somehow have heart failure. I don't know what, I would just zone out, I would black out, I wouldn't handle it. And that feeling of realising that I was so scared of something, and then now at the moment that I was faced to it, I was okay, was such a major breakthrough. And I suddenly realised that it's true. That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, because essentially when you are in front of your rats or whatever else you might be particularly alarmed about, you can handle it. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, or this week, just to see, is there anything that you've been, essentially it's about surprising yourself about how strong and capable you are actually in face of something that you might have thought would knock you for 6. So here we go, let's start the conversation.